Welcome to the session. We're going to wait a couple more minutes to see if anyone else shows up. I guess we can sort of start this off while we're waiting for people by talking about sort of like what your definition of plagiarism is, if you have one. So a common example that we always heard growing up was that if you change every third or fifth word in an excerpt, then it's not plagiarism.
Which their form of, they call that paraphrasing, which is the correct form of it.
Mm-hmm. So what are some things that maybe you guys learned growing up, or that possibly you've seen students do that are just kind of like, oh, well, that's plagiarism or that's not plagiarism type things?
I've always heard put it in your own words. Like you can take someone else's idea, but just put it in your own words and you're fine.
You mean without citing?
Without citing, yeah.
Without citing?
Without citing, yeah.
Okay.
Using something not your own without attribution.
That is definitely a good definition of what plagiarism is.
Yes, it is. Oh, okay.
We're just going to wait about one more minute to see if anyone else shows up a little late, and then we'll get started. Alrighty, so it doesn't look like anyone else is coming for right now, so I guess we should actually go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Willow Hoxie. I'm one of the librarians down at the reference desk. So anytime you come to the reference desk, you'll probably see me or one of the other librarians, such as...
I'm Denninger. I'm another librarian down at, you'll see at the reference desk. And you can come and chat with us, and we can help talk over this a little more, or if you have any other issues with anything.
Mm-hmm. So obviously today we're going to be talking about academic dishonesty and plagiarism, and more importantly, what it is, common ways that people commit plagiarism, and then more importantly, how to avoid it. So starting off, we're going to talk about what is the official university definition of academic dishonesty and plagiarism. So academic dishonesty is sort of like the blanket term of anything that you do that is, well, academically dishonest. One thing you will notice is that in a lot of syllabi, your professors will use academic dishonesty as a blanket term, and in many ways they'll substitute it for plagiarism. So a lot of times whenever you'll see your professor talking about academic dishonesty, they'll be talking about plagiarism. But it can be a very broad thing, as evidenced by these acts. So things that can constitute academic dishonesty, whenever you allow someone else's work to be graded as your own, if you turn in someone else's assignment for yours, if you say that you've done something that you haven't, if you, this doesn't happen as much anymore, but if, say, something's on reserve and you purposely keep it from people so you don't want anyone else in your class to have access to it, that would count as academic dishonesty. If you hack in and change your grades, or again, this doesn't happen as often, but again, denial of access to resources. And then more specifically, plagiarism is about whenever you take someone's ideas and you use them as your own and you don't credit them. So Deb had a very good definition of that earlier. Another way that you can commit plagiarism is if you're working in a group and you don't say that you're working in a group and you just take credit for all that work as your own. So plagiarism has some pretty serious consequences, as Danielle is going to explain to you now.
Yes. First off, instructors actually notify the student within 10 calendar days of the instance. Then the instructor has to report it to the provost office within 14 days past that initial 10. So at 24 days from the initial plagiarism, the provost has to be notified. And then in addition to this, the provost office will actually notify the department chair, and so everyone, and the dean of the department as well. So everyone is in the know of what is going on. Okay, I'm sorry, I felt like I missed a slide. Okay, regardless of, the option 2 is the instructor can have a failing grade for the assignment. They also have the option to have a failing grade for the course, or they can actually choose to give you a lower grade for the assignment, but then may actually have you do additional work to make up for the fact that you plagiarized one of your works. There's 2 different ways to go about it, and there's like a Form A and a Form B that is filled out.
And basically it's the friendly and the non-friendly way.
Yeah.
But regardless of the option, these are what may happen. So now we're going to talk about the different types of plagiarism, and we're going to show you some examples, and we're going to ask you, is this a good or a bad example? So first we're going to start with paraphrasing. So paraphrasing is sort of what a lot of people think of whenever they think of plagiarism, because it's the idea of taking someone else's ideas, putting it into your own words. So this is an excerpt that you read. On October 14th, 1912, an unemployed saloon keeper shot former president and Progressive Party candidate Theodore Roosevelt outside a Milwaukee hotel, etc. So this is, you look at this and then you write this in your presentation, or your paper, rather. A man shot former president and Progressive Party candidate Theodore Roosevelt in Milwaukee. Roosevelt continued with his 90-minute speech instead of going to the hospital. His long speech slowed the bullet, possibly saving his life. Is this a good or bad example of paraphrasing, and why?
The ideas?
So Deb is saying that it's bad because it has the same structure. That is correct. There's an improper paraphrasing, and there's also a lack of a citation. So if you're looking here at the highlighted parts, you can see that the red and blue parts almost exactly correspond. So clearly these are things that, this is not this person's ideas, they just stole it from there. And again, no citation, so we have no clue where this information is coming from. Now we're going to show you another example. Too far. Way too far. Sorry. So Teddy Roosevelt was a total badass because he still gave a speech after being shot in the chest. Kind of already gave this one away through technical difficulties. But clearly this is a good example because it has been cited and a proper paraphrasing. Maybe not the best wording to use in a paper, but it still gets the general gist of the idea without using any of the words that are used in the example.
Okay. And then another most common type of plagiarism that happens would be quoting. So basic quoting, you read these first 2 sentences out of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife, and so on. And here is your example that you start off your paper with. Would this count as an example of good quoting or poor quoting? Options. Poor quoting here in the room. Okay, that is correct. This is bad for the fact of there are no quotation marks to indicate that this is even a direct quote and no citation. As you see, it is the very first sentence in the highlighted section as we have here from the book. So this would basically just be stealing Jane Austen's work. Next version is in Jane Austen's classic novel Pride and Prejudice. The tone of the novel is set from the famous opening line, "Is the truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife?" So does this count as a good example or a bad example? Good. Yes. Yes, this is properly cited. We have the author, date, page number, and of course the quotations.
Alright, so next we're going to talk about something that's not quite as common as paraphrasing and quoting, but it's still pretty common. So this is something that you read. So you read, whereas the best American-born students have tended to gravitate towards careers in business and law, the first-choice careers of their counterparts from countries such as China and India is often in engineering and sciences. So this is something that you write. Would this count as plagiarism or not, and why? Yes!
Yes, it would count as plagiarism because you got some sort of statistics from somewhere and haven't cited where you got them from.
Exactly. So the basic idea behind plagiarism is that whoever is reading this has no clue where you have gotten that information. For all they know, you are pulling it out of the ether and it's completely made up. So, yes, trends are based on statistics, so this does need to be cited. So, how do we fix this? So this is still the same example. So does anyone have any ideas on how to fix this? Possibly someone online.
We'll take any ideas. Doesn't have to be right. Do you have an idea?
Sure, cite it.
Cite it, yes.
Yes, as Deb says, an in-text citation. So we don't actually, yes, or as Miriam says, add your citation. So this is paraphrasing on its own. So this is proper paraphrasing. However, without the citation, it is plagiarism. But if you add this handy little citation here in green, it's perfectly fine.
Okay. Another thing that usually gets people a little confused would be common knowledge, whether or not this needs to be cited, not needs to be cited. And common knowledge is usually, it doesn't, I can't talk anymore today, I'm sorry. Okay. These kinds of statements are known as common knowledge that are ones that are like widely known fact, such as state capitals, the sky is blue,
Sun rises in the east, sets in the west.
Large historical events, stuff that is pretty commonly known are that. However, if you have any doubts at all, go ahead and cite it. You will not get in trouble for citing way too much. In fact, your professor will probably appreciate it, and then they might talk with you about how you might want to add a little more original thought, but you've at least made sure that you have not plagiarized. Okay, so you read that a tip given most constantly by professors and college officials is that students should simply do their homework. The most commonly prescribed amount is at least 2 hours of class preparation for every hour spent in the classroom. So you actually read this and you put in your paper, college students should do 2 hours of homework for every hour of class. Is this a good example of common knowledge and you don't need to cite it, or is this actually a bad example and it needs a citation?
Bad example.
I was going to say.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, it is a bad example because it's making a specific claim without providing the evidence.
So this goes back to trends and statistics. We don't know where you got the number.
So we do need a citation for this one. Next option would be college students should do their homework. Would this one count, or do you need a quotation for this one as well, or a citation for that as well? Yes.
I mean, I'd call that common knowledge.
Yes, we count that. It's a common sense fact or idea.
You should do your
You
homework.
should do your homework. Okay.
All right, so then another type of plagiarism is that plagiarism is not just about text. It's not just about words. So if you're doing this report on the anatomy of a giraffe, you need an illustration of a giraffe's intestinal tract. You find this picture online and put it in your presentation. Do you need to cite this? Does it count as plagiarism if you don't cite it in your PowerPoint? Yes, it does. So not citing this would constitute as plagiarism, and again, citing, very simple. Just need to put source where you got it. So the basic principle of plagiarism and citation is everything comes from somewhere, we need to know from where.
Okay, and the last option we're going to talk about is fraud.
Fraud falls more under academic dishonesty than straight plagiarism.
Yes. So an example, this is a scenario for you, is that you are conducting a survey of 20 people, however, you only get 10 responses and the assignment is due tomorrow. You don't have enough to get the other 10 responses, you don't have enough time to get the other 10 responses, so instead you fill out the survey yourself and then you report the responses as they were all individually filled in. Now, would this count as fraud, or does it not? I'm seeing a lot of head nods, so yes, it is in fact fraud because you have passed off 10 people's, or theoretical people, as yourself, or you've passed yourself off for 10 theoretical people.
All right, so yeah, these are all scenarios to explain that academic dishonesty is not just plagiarism. There's lots of different things. Fraud is a little more specific to the sciences, as you can see in these examples. Another very common example would be that you're conducting a study and the results that you're getting are positive, but not enough to make a solid conclusion either way. Instead of reporting the results as is, you emphasize the data that supports your hypothesis. Would this count as fraud? Yes. Yes, it would. So this again falls under the academic dishonesty of you're misrepresenting what you actually have. So that's just sort of showing that academic dishonesty can be very broad, in that basically what you need to do to not be academically dishonest, not constitute plagiarism, is just be honest. Tell where you got your things. Don't lie about your data. Those sort of things. So now we have a little activity, and yes, you can participate online. Alright, so this is a paper that you are writing about tiger populations. We would like you to take about 10 minutes or so to go through it and go ahead and point out areas that could possibly constitute plagiarism. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to look at how we can fix this paper. If you have any questions, we are available.
Okay, we just want to go ahead and check to see, is everyone fairly good right now? Or, you know, we know it's a little before the 10-minute mark, we just wanted to check in, mainly with the people online, to see if they're good for us to move on.
Alright, so looks like we're good to go ahead and move on. So what are some parts of this that you noticed could use some editing? And anyone in person or online? Question is open. Yes.
The graph figure needs to be cited.
Yes, yes it does. There's no citation. We have no clue where this is from. So, other things. Yes.
The increase in 22% in the citation.
It does. That is a quote, and we have no clue where it is from.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Anyone online have anything?
King?
Oh.
The second paragraph,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know where that information comes from as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, JC is saying even if you created the graph, we still need to know where you got the info. That's true. We don't know if you created this graph, if you just pulled it from somewhere. So it's a very good point, JC.
Yes. And the second paragraph does need a citation as well. The main the very first sentence actually comes from our same original source here. The second one can be left up to debate whether or not that counts as common knowledge, for the fact of, we know tigers have, well, at least ever since I've been alive, tigers have been endangered. So that's kind of like one of those, is that a common fact? Is common knowledge? Is it not common knowledge sort of thing?
So that might be something where cite if you're not sure. Anything else? Yes.
Oh, I'm just repeating that to myself. I was thinking that the third ministerial conference is, so I guess it would depend on would that mean, I think that would need to be cited, that they know how, that there is one happening. That doesn't seem like that would be common knowledge. Does it?
Nope, you are all correct. So here is the correct form of this with everything properly cited. So we actually pulled all this information from an article in the India Times about the tiger population and its status at the moment. This was a graphic that was included in that article, including that source. So all of the citations are the same because it's all the same author. It's all from one article, except for the debatable common knowledge statistic about whether or not tigers are endangered, which we pulled from the World Wildlife Fund.
It's the second part that requires the citation, that there's now a lot more hope. I mean,
Right. That makes sense.
True.
Okay, so we just sort of gone over an example of like a paper and how you can fix it so that you are no longer committing plagiarism. Here's some other tips and tricks that we've got about how to avoid plagiarism. So avoiding plagiarism. Number one, and the one you probably hear the most often, is please try and start your research ahead of time.
Yes. And
It really sucks whenever you're like having to do your paper like 2 days before, and then you're also having to do all the reading for that paper 2 days before. That cuts down a lot on your time.
And once you start skimming through so many sources, it all starts blurring in one. You start questioning, well, I just knew that, versus you've actually read it somewhere. You just read it generally the same thing in 3 different places, and it does need to be cited.
Another example would be to save your search results. You may think, oh, I'll totally be able to go back and find this article later whenever I need it. You don't know that you're going to be able to do that. New articles are added to databases every day. Search results can change. So you're just kind of like, oh, this was the 5th search result in my search string. There's no guarantee it's going to be the 5th search result in 2 days.
Don't rely on that.
Yeah.
A good way you can email it to yourself if you have a flash drive with you. You can save it, and actually, that's what I prefer to do, is actually get the PDF and save it. That way I don't have to rely on going back and finding it electronically, because I've lost them that way too.
And you can even store them in the cloud or someplace like Box, which as a university student you do have access to. Another example is cite when you're writing. So this is something whenever you're actually going through writing. If you put something in there that needs to be cited, even if you don't like put the full citation in there, put a little reminder to yourself for whenever you go back, just being like, hey, you cited something here, make sure that that's right. For me personally, I just put little parentheses there so I remember, hey, something needs to be in these parentheses.
I take it a step further because I forget which article I've gone and used, so I'll actually just tack in maybe the author's name, maybe the first word of the title, maybe the page number if it was an actual quote, because that's one of the worst things is you need to cite this, but you don't remember where it came from, and when that paper's due at midnight and it's 11 o'clock, you're trying to avoid these things.
Yeah, and again, that's something where you would worry about formatting later depending on whichever style your professor prefers. The important thing is just that you know something needs to be cited here. And then again, as we stated earlier, when in doubt, cite. If you're not sure if it needs to be cited, just cite it. No one has ever had trouble for putting in too many citations. So then finally, here are some resources if you still need help with this, because plagiarism can be a kind of tricky topic, especially as you get more into it. So we have a lovely LibGuide that this presentation is a part of. And then also later this presentation will be uploaded to that LibGuide so you can re-watch this as needed. The Writing Center is always available. We've got their hours, their phone number, and their email address, and there are writing tutors in Ellis where you can drop by. And then finally, of course, there's us, the resource of the reference desk here at the library. We have our hours that we're there, and then there's also the email through which you can contact us. Does anyone have any questions or any concerns that they'd like to address? Now is the time. Yes.
Well, I don't have a concern, but while you were talking about that, I remembered that yesterday I was talking to somebody who wanted help finding a book that she had cited, she thought maybe 10 years ago, and she had made a sheet, like she had made some notes to herself, and she wasn't sure if it was a direct quote or not, and she had just the name of the author. She was pretty sure she knew what book it was. There were two authors actually, and they were unusual enough together that it wasn't that hard to find them, but she sure made herself a lot of work. And she was going to have to pull that book and go through the whole thing to figure out whether or not it was a direct quote or a paraphrase. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the page numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I start typing, writing in those little things, including page number, because I've lost information before.
Yeah, especially in a book, you're going to want to make sure to write that page number down for the quote that you've got, because like Danielle was saying, if it's 11 o'clock at night and you've got a quote and you don't remember what page it's on, it's a real pain to have to flip through an entire book to figure out which page it's on.
Yeah. It's another thing when it's, a 20-page article, that's fine. But when you're going through like a 350-page book, you think it was in this chapter, but in fact it's like 2 before that.
Does anyone online have any questions? All right, well then, thank you guys for coming. As stated, we have these lovely resources available for you to contact us, and we do have the LibGuide for those of you online that has this presentation in case you missed anything or weren't quite sure. And I say we are always available to be contacted for further questions. But thank you for coming.
Thank you.